Eriu presents Spirit Level, written by Richy Craven and read by Seán Burke. Chapter 1. Danny woke to the sound of moaning. A deep, sorrowful howl echoed through the flat, the lack of any real furniture and terrible build quality working together to create acoustics that Dalby could only dream of. He stared at the ceiling, figuring out what he could do next. He could hide in his room, trying to make shapes out of the water stains on the ceiling, hoping it would go away, or he could confront whatever was making the noise. Option A was obviously the most appealing. Unfortunately, he had been trialling this on a pro-tem basis for the past 15 minutes and the noise showed no signs of going away. If anything, it was getting louder, as if the first quarter of an hour had just been an overture. As quietly as he could, he dug a pair of tracksuit bottoms and a hoodie out from the piles of clothes that formed drifts between the floor and his desk. Whatever he was going to be confronting, he'd prefer not to do so in his boxers. Once dressed, he pawed in the dark for his phone on the nightstand being something of a grandiose term for a stool he'd taken from the sitting room. The time on the screen read just after 5 o'clock. The phone's light illuminated the rest of his room, and he briefly wondered if he'd been the victim of poltergeist activity before remembering that this was just how he lived. The sound was even louder in the hallway and allowed Danny to triangulate its source, the living area straight ahead. Cautiously, he made his way towards the far end of the hall and paused at the threshold of the living room. The kitchenette was in view now, and he was able to rule it out as the source of the noise. He'd half wondered this whole time whether it might have just been the contents of the salad drawer finally gaining sentience, but whatever was there remained in the primordial stages of life. The sound was coming from the sitting room, off to the right, and out of view of the hall. If anything, it sounded even less human this close up. He was about to take a step inside, but his breath caught in his throat as he saw the handprint. It was on the frame of the door that led into the sitting room, dark, sticky and glistening a sickly red in the light from Danny's phone torch. He took a breath and stood up to his full height in an attempt to look as intimidating as possible. At 5'9", this was not terribly effective. Steeling himself, he stepped into the sitting room to confront whatever horrors awaited. And the sight was horrific. A red-haired man was passed out across his couch. The fact that it was a small leather two-seater and the man was well over 6 feet tall meant that only his head, shoulders and chest were actually horizontal. The opposite arm of the sofa had forced his legs into a right angle from the rest of his body, the soles of his grubby Converse almost pointing at the ceiling. This awkward position was, Danny supposed, what was causing his drunken snores to emerge as drawn-out groans. In front of the intruder, the remnants of a Chinese takeaway were leaking onto the cheap laminate coffee table. Danny looked back at the handprint and, after a moment's hesitation, dipped his finger into the dark stain and sniffed at it. Sweet and sour sauce. He sighed as he wandered over to the sleeping housebreaker and prodded him with one foot. "Did you at least bring me something this time?" he asked. The red-haired man didn't even open his eyes. "Chicken balls are in the bag," Nudge said, and then attempted to curl up in the fetal position to fit as much of himself on the sofa as possible. Danny dug through the remnants of the takeaway and found the small paper bag, already see-through with grease, as promised. Rent for the night secured, he padded back to his bedroom and left his best friend snoring on the couch. "You told me you lost that key," Danny asked his friend. It was 3 hours later and both Danny and Nudge were enjoying a light breakfast of prawn crackers and leftover fried rice. "I had," Nudge said. "I found the keys in the jacket I wore out, so I figured it was like serendipity or something." Paul Nugent, known exclusively as Nudge, had hit his height of 6'2" towards the end of their second year of school. This, combined with his rail-thin frame and frizzy red hair, had made it almost impossible for him to blend in. Sometime around their leaving cert, he'd made peace with this and had concluded that, if he was going to stand out anyway, then he might as well lean into it. As such, his outfit of choice for that night started with a pair of ultra-fitted green chinos. These were offset by a bright blue belt, but the eyes were drawn away from even this towards his shirt. It was yellow, at least, broadly yellow. The designer had started with the most eye-catching shade possible, but then
Sample complete. Ready to continue?